Tonight, we are confronted with two moments that on the surface seem worlds apart, yet together reveal something essential about the state of American politics. On one hand, a former president addresses the nation invoking unity, strength, and destiny. On the other, a sitting senator turns a regulatory hearing into a personal insult, aimed not at policy, not at power, but at a late night comedian. These are not isolated spectacles, they are symptoms. And if we fail to read them together, we miss the real story unfolding before us. Hook, power and performance. When Donald Trump addresses the nation, the question is never simply what he says, but why he says it and for whom. Such speeches are carefully staged performances of authority designed to reassure supporters and provoke critics in equal measure. They promise order in a time of chaos, strength in a time of uncertainty. Yet beneath the language of patriotism and grievance lies a deeper reality. Political power today survives not on solutions but on spectacle. The speech is less about governing and more about commanding attention. Economic and political undercurrent. Listen closely and you will hear what is missing. You will hear little about stagnant wages, corporate concentration, or the quiet transfer of wealth upward that continues regardless of who occupies the microphone. The nation is addressed, but the economic system remains untouched. That silence is not accidental. It reflects a political economy in which real decisions are made far from public speeches, while symbolic battles dominate the airwaves. Hook, the Kimmel moment. Then comes the Ted Cruz moment at the FCC hearing, an insult hurled at Jimmy Kimmel during what is supposed to be a serious discussion about regulation, media, and public interest. Ask yourself, why does a senator use public time to mock a comedian? Because ridicule has become a political weapon. Because turning governance into entertainment distracts us from asking harder questions about who controls media, who sets the rules, and who benefits from them. Political power in the modern United States increasingly functions as a form of performance rather than a mechanism for solving public problems. When national leaders address the country, the event is no longer centered on governance in its traditional sense, clear plans, measurable outcomes, or accountability, but on the ability to command attention, dominate the news cycle, and emotionally mobilize an audience. The speech becomes a stage, the audience becomes divided into supporters and critics, and the substance of policy quietly recedes into the background. This shift is not accidental. It reflects a political environment where visibility often matters more than effectiveness. Consider how carefully such addresses are designed. Every pause, phrase, and gesture is calculated to project authority and certainty, even when certainty is precisely what is lacking. The goal is not to explain complexity, but to simplify reality into slogans that feel powerful and decisive. This creates an immediate hook for viewers, a sense that someone is in control during times of anxiety and uncertainty. Yet the comfort provided is largely symbolic. The performance reassures without resolving, excites without explaining, and rallies without repairing what is broken. This performative approach thrives because it transforms politics into a form of entertainment. Viewers are encouraged to watch as they would a dramatic series, anticipating conflict, enjoying provocation, and choosing sides. The more dramatic the delivery, the more it circulates across media platforms, reinforcing the idea that impact is measured by reaction rather than results. In this environment, a bold statement can outweigh a thoughtful solution, and a viral moment can eclipse months of serious policy work. The hook is spectacle, and it works precisely because it feels urgent and emotionally charged. What disappears in this process is the harder, less glamorous work of governing. Structural issues such as wage stagnation, healthcare access, housing affordability, and corporate concentration cannot be solved in a single address, nor can they be reduced to applause lines. They require sustained effort, compromise, and transparency, qualities that do not translate easily into dramatic performances. As a result, these issues are often mentioned briefly, if at all, while the spotlight remains fixed on identity, loyalty, and conflict. The danger lies in how this performance reshapes public expectations. When citizens grow accustomed to politics as theater, they may begin to judge leaders by confidence and confrontation rather than competence and outcomes. A speech that feels strong can be mistaken for strong leadership, even if it produces no meaningful change. This creates a cycle in which politicians are rewarded for how convincingly they perform power, not for how effectively they use it. The hook becomes emotional satisfaction, while the cost is a growing distance between political rhetoric and lived reality. When national leaders speak, the language is often rich with references to unity, strength, and national pride, yet strikingly poor in honest engagement with the economic realities shaping everyday life. These speeches create a powerful emotional atmosphere, drawing listeners in with promises of resilience and greatness, but they rarely confront the structural forces that define whether most people can afford health care, housing, or a secure future. This absence is not a minor oversight, it is a defining feature of contemporary political communication, and once noticed, it becomes impossible to ignore. The hook lies in what is left unsaid. Audiences are encouraged to focus on identity, conflict, and symbolism, while the economic system operating beneath their lives remains largely invisible. Wage stagnation, rising household debt, corporate consolidation, and the steady erosion of labor protections are complex issues that resist easy slogans. Addressing them honestly would require acknowledging trade-offs, power imbalances, and the limits of political will. Instead, speeches often substitute emotional reassurance for economic clarity, offering a sense of collective pride as a stand-in for material security. This pattern serves a purpose. By avoiding detailed economic discussion, leaders protect themselves from accountability. Vague promises of growth or prosperity can be endlessly repeated without ever being tested against measurable outcomes. The audience hears words that sound hopeful, but without timelines, mechanisms, or commitments, those words float free of responsibility. The speech becomes a performance of concern rather than a plan for change, inviting applause without inviting scrutiny. That emotional payoff is immediate, while the economic consequences are delayed and diffuse. The result is a public conversation that feels intense but remains shallow. Economic power, who holds it, how it is exercised, and how it shapes policy, rarely takes center stage. Instead, debates revolve around personalities and cultural conflict, which are far easier to dramatize. This creates a powerful distraction. While attention is focused on symbolic victories and rhetorical battles, wealth continues to concentrate at the top, and economic insecurity deepens for millions who are told again and again that the nation is thriving. What makes this omission especially effective is that it feels normal. Listeners come to expect soaring language rather than concrete economic analysis, and over time, the absence of substance stops being noticed. The hook is familiarity, a well-rehearsed script that sounds reassuring because it has been heard so many times before. Yet beneath that comfort lies a troubling reality. Decisions about markets, labor, and corporate power continue to shape lives without being meaningfully debated in public. This silence has consequences for democracy itself. When economic realities are excluded from national speeches, citizens are denied the information needed to evaluate leadership honestly. Politics becomes a matter of belief rather than understanding, loyalty rather than evidence. The emotional appeal may inspire, but it also disarms critical thought, leaving audiences moved but uninformed. In that space, inequality can grow unchecked, not because it is hidden, but because it is never truly named. When a sitting senator uses the setting of a federal regulatory hearing to insult a late-night television host, the moment is revealing not because of the target, but because of the venue. These hearings exist to examine power, regulate industries, and protect the public interest. They are designed for careful questioning, evidence, and accountability. Turning such a space into a stage for personal mockery signals a deeper shift in how political authority is exercised and understood. The hook is immediate. If governance can be interrupted for a punchline, what does that say about the seriousness with which public responsibility is being treated? The choice to attack an entertainer rather than engage substantively with regulatory issues reflects the growing influence of media logic over institutional norms. In an attention-driven political environment, visibility often outweighs relevance. A sharp insult travels faster than a thoughtful exchange about policy, and it guarantees headlines, clips, and social media circulation. The performance succeeds not because it advances public understanding, but because it provokes reaction. In that sense, the hearing becomes less about regulation and more about reputation management within a polarized media ecosystem. This moment also illustrates how culture has become a proxy battlefield for political power. By targeting a comedian, the senator positions himself within a familiar narrative of grievance and defiance, signaling loyalty to a particular audience. The hook lies in recognition. Supporters instantly understand the gesture as a symbolic victory, while critics respond with outrage, further amplifying the moment. What disappears in this exchange is the actual purpose of the hearing: scrutinizing institutions that shape communication, markets, and democratic access. The transformation of governance into entertainment carries real consequences. Regulatory bodies wield enormous influence over media ownership, speech, and competition, yet these issues rarely generate viral interest on their own. When hearings are reduced to theatrical moments, the public is deprived of meaningful insight into how power operates. The insult fills the airtime that might otherwise be used to challenge concentrated influence or demand transparency. Spectacle does not merely distract, it displaces substance. Over time, this pattern reshapes expectations. If lawmakers are rewarded with attention for performative behavior, there is little incentive to prioritize detailed, often tedious policy work. The hook becomes conflict, not competence. Institutions designed to function as checks on power risk, becoming backdrops for personal branding. This erodes trust, not because citizens are disengaged, but because they are asked to watch rather than understand. What makes such moments especially effective is their ambiguity. They can be dismissed as jokes, framed as cultural commentary, or defended as free expression, allowing their institutional costs to go unexamined. Yet each instance quietly lowers the standard of seriousness expected from public office. When ridicule replaces inquiry, and insult replaces investigation, the line between governance and entertainment blurs further, leaving the public informed about personalities but increasingly disconnected from the policies that shape their lives. Culture wars function as one of the most effective political tools of the modern era because they redirect public energy away from structural problems and toward emotionally charged but materially limited conflicts. These battles feel urgent because they are framed around identity, morality, and belonging, issues that strike at how people see themselves and others. The hook is powerful and immediate. It feels personal, it feels threatening, and it feels like choosing a side is a form of action. Yet while attention is absorbed by these symbolic struggles, the deeper economic and institutional forces shaping daily life continue largely undisturbed. What makes culture wars so useful politically is their simplicity. Structural problems such as income inequality, corporate concentration, healthcare costs, and labor insecurity are complex, slow moving, and difficult to explain without sustained effort. They require confronting systems rather than personalities. Culture war issues, by contrast, offer clear villains, sharp language, and instant emotional payoff. They turn politics into a moral drama rather than an economic debate. The public is invited to react, not to analyze, and reaction is far easier to mobilize than understanding. This dynamic also fractures collective awareness. By emphasizing cultural divisions, people who share similar economic struggles are encouraged to see each other as opponents rather than allies. A worker's frustration is redirected toward cultural resentment instead of upward toward economic power. The hook here is misdirection. Anger feels justified, but its target is shifted. As long as public attention is consumed by symbolic conflict, there is little sustained pressure to question who controls wealth, sets policy priorities, or benefits most from the existing system. For political leaders, this approach offers safety. Challenging structural problems means confronting powerful interests, corporations, financial institutions, and entrenched political networks. That path carries risk. Culture wars, however, allow leaders to appear decisive and combative without threatening those foundations. Strong language replaces strong policy. Performance replaces reform. The conflict looks fierce, but the system remains stable. The audience sees motion and assumes progress, even when none is occurring. Media ecosystems intensify this effect. Culture war content generates outrage, loyalty, and constant engagement, making it ideal for modern news cycles and social platforms. Structural analysis demands time, context, and patience, qualities that struggle to compete with viral moments. As a result, symbolic controversies are amplified, while systemic issues fade into the background. The hook is repetition. When the same cultural battles dominate attention day after day, they begin to feel like the central struggles of society, regardless of their actual impact. Over time, this distortion reshapes how people understand politics. Engagement becomes emotional rather than strategic. Citizens may feel deeply involved, constantly reacting to the latest controversy, yet remain disconnected from mechanisms of real change. Politics feels exhausting but unproductive, loud but ineffective. The danger is not apathy but misdirected passion. Energy is spent fighting over symbols, while the structures that determine economic security, opportunity, and power continue operating quietly, protected not by secrecy, but by distraction. The modern culture war operates as a powerful distraction, drawing public attention towards symbolic conflicts while deeper structural problems remain largely untouched. These battles over language, entertainment, identity, and outrage feel urgent and personal, which is precisely why they are so effective. They invite emotional investment and instant reactions, pulling people into arguments that appear meaningful but rarely alter the material conditions of their lives. The hook is immediate. It feels like something is at stake, even when the real stakes lie elsewhere. Culture war controversies are easy to package and endlessly repeat. A provocative comment, a public insult, or a viral clip can dominate news cycles for days, generating a sense of constant crisis. Meanwhile, issues such as rising inequality, weakened labor protections, healthcare access, and corporate consolidation receive far less sustained attention. These problems are complex, technical, and resistant to simple narratives. They do not lend themselves to clear villains or quick victories, making them less attractive in an environment driven by ratings and engagement. What makes this distraction particularly effective is how it divides the public. Culture wars encourage people to see politics as a battle between opposing identities rather than a collective struggle over shared economic realities. Individuals are pushed to defend or attack symbols instead of questioning systems. This fragmentation weakens the possibility of unified pressure for structural reform. While citizens argue over cultural flashpoints, the economic arrangements that benefit a small concentration of power continue with little resistance. Political leaders often exploit this dynamic because it is safer than confronting structural change. Taking on entrenched economic interests requires challenging donors, corporations, and institutional norms. Engaging in culture war rhetoric, by contrast, allows politicians to appear bold and combative without threatening existing power structures. The hook here is performance. A leader can signal strength and loyalty to a base while leaving the underlying system intact. The fight feels real, but the risk is minimal. Media institutions play a central role in reinforcing this cycle. Cultural conflict delivers strong emotional responses, which translate into clicks, shares, and advertising revenue. Structural issues demand time, explanation, and patience, qualities that struggle to survive in fast-moving news environments. As a result, coverage skews toward drama rather than depth, reinforcing the illusion that symbolic battles are the central political struggles of our time. Over time, this pattern reshapes public understanding of politics itself. When attention is consistently diverted toward culture war issues, structural problems begin to feel abstract or inevitable, as though they exist beyond human control. The hook becomes exhaustion. People feel politically engaged, yet powerless, intensely informed about controversies, but disconnected from meaningful change. This is the quiet cost of distraction, not silence, but noise, so loud and constant that it drowns out the conversations that might actually alter the distribution of power and opportunity in society.